So that's the story of my nervous breakdown when I was on tour with Def Poetry Jam. The day after this occurred, I was on a plane back to Brooklyn, where I was living at the time. A day after that, I went to 4 different psychiatrists trying to figure out what was wrong with me. The first one, I lied to. And I said, I'm just exhausted, I haven't been sleeping much. And he said, you've got a fear of success. That's what it is. And he wrote me a note so I could get back on tour. I knew he was wrong, but I needed somebody to tell me that I was normal, so I acted as normal as I possibly could. Did the same thing for the second and the third. The fourth one, I was exhausted. And I looked at her and I said, I'm going to lie to you because I need you to tell me I'm normal. And from then, she made the decision to push me a little bit more. And the more she pushed, the more I spoke. And I told her about everything from the time I was 6 years old and was up all night counting stars because I couldn't sleep. When, the normal anxiety and excitement that came from the first day of school, you'd stay up a little bit later than you normal, but you'd go to sleep at some point. I would be up all night. I would get dressed at midnight and just be in my school clothes, sitting up, waiting for morning to come because I couldn't sleep. My first major bout with depression began when I was in college, and my first semester of college I got a 0.0 because I never left my dorm room. And I continued on up and down. When I had my ups, I would get a 4.0. When I had my lows, I'd get a 0.0. So I don't even know what my grades ended up being after a certain point. And when I made the decision to leave college, when I was in New York and decided I was never going home again, I realized that there was something wrong, and I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew that if I could just keep running from it, I'd be okay. So I just kept running and running and running until this incident happened, and I completely hit a wall and couldn't run anymore. I have a unique platform. I'm a writer, I'm a poet. I get to be in front of audiences and people all the time talking about whatever it is I want to. And when I was first diagnosed, I made the decision not to say anything. I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my friends, I just sort of held it. I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, I felt broken, I felt like I had done something wrong. I didn't understand why I couldn't just be normal, so I did everything I could to pretend to be normal. I would literally sit in Union Square Park and watch people and try to see what normal looked like and try to see if I could emulate normal. I'd see these, women my age, completely, made up, and hair's perfect and clothes perfect, and they were on their way to their office jobs, and they were laughing and they were just having a great time, and I'm sitting there in the same sweatpants I'd had on for months, it felt like, just watching them and trying to figure out what happened, when did I break, and why. One day, about 4 or 5 months after I was diagnosed, I was watching a show called Girlfriends. I don't know if anybody remembers the show. Girlfriends at the time was the #1 show in Black households. When I was diagnosed with bipolar 2, I literally said to my doctor, I'm the only Black person who has this, aren't I? And he said, I don't think so. And I was like, no, I've never heard of this before, and I'm fairly certain that I'm the only Black person who has it. Watching Girlfriends that night, they happened to have a storyline about bipolar disorder, and I got really excited. I felt like I was going to be validated. I felt like somebody was going to talk about this thing that I had, and they were going to talk about it to other people for me to make it easier for me to talk about it. What happened instead was they gave the character bipolar by name, but the symptoms that she was exhibiting were multiple personality disorder and schizophrenia, and they just got it completely wrong. And I was so angry and so hurt, like they'd done something personal to me, because I felt like this is an opportunity that they had to educate a whole bunch of people, millions of people at once, and instead they miseducated a lot of people at once. And I was devastated because one of the characters, I don't know if you remember, Lynn, who was the flaky one, the flighty one, she never could hold down a job, she was me, she could never get it together, and she said, I have this. I gotta be bipolar. My mom's bipolar, so I'm bipolar. And Joan held her and said, no, you're nothing like that. You're normal. And I started crying. I was like, so I'm not, what? Like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. That night, I went on my website and I wrote a blog post and just told the story from, I don't know, it was probably the longest blog post ever written, but I told the story completely from being a kid and how I felt, dropping out of college, and then a couple of months before when I was diagnosed. And the response was overwhelming. So many people who had been feeling the same way or had been diagnosed or had just knew that something wasn't right. And they were living with this thing and they didn't know what to do and what to call it. They were able to speak out and they were able to go and tell somebody and start getting help. And that's when I started talking to people. I told my parents, I told my best friends. Every show that I did, I would close with a little spiel about mental health, hoping that in some small way I'd be able to sort of lift the stigma a little bit. People are afraid to talk about it. They're afraid of being labeled. They're afraid that if they say that they have a mental illness, they become the mental illness and they stop being who they are. And one of the things that I stress for myself is that mental illness is what I have. It's not who I am. I don't have, I'm not the flu when I get the flu. I'm not cancer. I'm not, I'm not a headache. I have a headache, or you get cancer, or you have, all these different things. It's not a part of, it's a part of you and something that you have to live with. It's not something you suffer from if you manage it correctly with medication, with doctors, with living like a very, it's a lot more difficult. I have to monitor myself very, very strictly. There's certain things I can't do. And if I start getting a little bit this way, I need to pull myself back. So I'm hyper aware of everything that I do at every time. Like just sitting here, I was getting nervous and I had to check and say, okay, is this nerves or is this a panic attack? And so little things like that I'm always constantly doing. So that's my story. And if anyone has any questions before I go on to the next part, I'd be more than happy to answer them.